Hello and welcome to From the Beehole End Live. Yes, we're live. It's me, Simon Evans, here with Andrew Greaves, Justin Connolly, Paul Woodhouse, and Chris Bowden. And it's great to do this. We're going to give it a try on YouTube. And everyone all right? Everyone ready to go?
Good, mate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Yeah, so let's get down to it. We're going to start off with a bit of news and then we'll go into questions. We've got lots of questions. If you do want to ask any questions, you can use the chat feature at the side of the screen on YouTube as well. That's probably a better way of doing it live during the show than doing it on Twitter, because we aren't going to be monitoring Twitter all the way through the show. But feel free to send in whatever questions or comments you have. Let's get started with a bit of news. And Nathan Redmond, not good news. Chris Bowden, it was a bit of a blow that to see that about Nathan Redmond.
Oh, massively! It was a bit like the Ben Gibson episode, wasn't it? That nobody sort of had a peep of his injury, and all of a sudden there's a picture of him lying in a hospital bed. And I don't think with no sort of idea what it is, how long he's going to be out for, but it doesn't look clever at all. And again, there'd been a sort of bit of speculation back in Turkey where he'd been playing at Besiktas, and he was not too happy with his role at Burnley and maybe looking to get back that way. But that obviously puts a kibosh on that. But it's a shame. So we haven't really seen. I think if you poll Burnley fans, I think the vast majority of them would say it was a very sensible signing, a free transfer, and good Premier League experience, and an exciting wide player, experienced wide player. But he's just not had the opportunity, really, has he? He's played as a false nine at times and shown flashes of his class, but who knows when we'll see him again.
Yeah, it is a blow for him, isn't it? But Greavesy, I mean, he wasn't playing a big role, was he? He seemed to be in a sort of specialist last 10 minutes man, really. But I don't know. Do we go and look in the transfer market for another last 10 minutes man? I mean, seriously though, do we need any to look for a bit more experience if he's our experienced man?
Yeah, I think we'd said a few times on the podcast that him being the experienced man, we expect a company perhaps to use him a little bit more, and I certainly expected him to play a bigger role. He had a good season last season, by all accounts, with Besiktas in Turkey, and he's actually not as old as we think, is he? I think he's 29, 30, something like that. So he's not somebody who's over the hill from a Premier League point of view, and still has plenty of class. So yeah, I think company will have a look. I think he probably wants his stock levels to be at such a point. And if we're going to talk about transfers and jungle drums are banging over Benson, looking like he's definitely going to leave, our friend Sasha basically touting him to various clubs and things. So I do think we'll probably look for somebody else. I'm not sure we really need somebody else, given what we've got, not in that position. But yeah, I think unfortunately, if we don't see him again in a Burnley shirt, it'll be a bit disappointing, because I think he probably could have added something that we've been lacking over the last 6 months, first 6 months of the Premier League season.
I mean, Justin, that Benson aspect of it there that Greavesy just raised, I mean, he's been linked more than any of our players with a move. Now, we know how the media works with transfer rumours, and we should take some of it with a pinch of salt when you look at where stuff's coming from. But as Greavesy said, Sasha seems to have an idea what's going on inside the entourages of Belgian players. Are you surprised that, I mean, we've all been surprised that Benson's hardly featured, but are you surprised that he seems to be being, moved along so quickly?
Well, not really. Not considering that he hasn't featured. Not considering that he's. I mean, I don't. Has he started a game this season? Man, he didn't start many last season, did he? He was used a bit more of a as an impact sub. I think it's one of those situations where, we need to offload some of the players that aren't playing regularly, and he's one of the ones who probably comes, with a decent price tag. More money than we paid for him, I would have thought. I think it's just as simple as that. If he isn't going to play, we might as well cash in now while we can, because if we wait till the summer, he's not going to be worth anywhere near as much as he is now, is he? I think it's just it's that
probably dropped a bit already, hasn't he?
Yeah, he probably has. I mean, he seems quite injury prone, doesn't he? So that'll be a factor in it as well. But most of these players who haven't featured this season much, they've all got to be up for grabs, haven't they? Otherwise, there's no point in them sitting on the bench or not even making the bench, is there?
No, that's right. I mean, Woody, there's been other mentions. I mean, Leeds United's supposed to be in for Benson. They've also been strongly rumoured to be in for Connor Roberts as well. Don't know. Again, we don't know how much truth there is in that. But are you expecting to see a few out the door? I mean, it does seem slightly strange that a team at the bottom of the table would be moving people out, but maybe we have to shuffle the deck again.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we've said since the season started in pre-season, who we needed, and we still don't have those people that we need in the right position. So it makes sense for people who aren't playing to be shuffled along, and hopefully we do get the right folks in. It shouldn't be too bad.
Got to say, it did raise a smile though. Reading today's rumor that's coming out of Turkey that Burnley are interested in a winger.
Surely not.
Tete, who's been at Galatasaray, was with Leicester City before that. I didn't really pick up much of him at Leicester City, to be honest. Anybody, Chris?
Absolutely not a dickiber, but again, it's no surprise to see Burnley linked with a wide player, is it? But it's again, I'd be sad to see Benson depart. So I mean, say Vincent's a better judge of player than we are, and he's seen more of Benson in training than we have. And but I think him and Zaroury have started twice between them. So we don't. He's not had a fair crack at it. Obviously, he's had the injury that he picked up at Salford in the League Cup, but the lad has magic in that left boot, hasn't he? And he might be one of those players that doesn't necessarily contribute to the framework, the structure of the team, but he'll just pop up with that bit of magic and might nick us a few points here and there. But it's crazy. You're looking at sort of Leeds fans saying, "Well, I don't want him because he's not done much in the Premier League if we get there." And it's heartbreaking to see that people coming to that sort of conclusion. Really, when we've all seen what he's capable of at Championship level. He's a match winner, and Lord knows why we've not seen enough of him and Zaroury.
No, it is a head scratcher. That, I mean, is it as ridiculous an idea as it seems at first that we're in for a winger in the January window? I mean, if we'd have said that at the start of the season, we'd have probably all been guffawing and laughing about it, wouldn't we? But if Koleosho's out injured, Zaroury's not featuring, Benson's on his way out of the door, the huge Redmond's injured, who was one of our wide options. Goodmanson picks up a lot of injury. I mean, is it that crazy really to say, well, we need another winger, or are we sticking, and hoping that Odebert and Brun Larsen stay fit all year? Really, aren't we? Otherwise, Greavesy.
Yeah, I think you're right when you put it like that. But I then just wonder why, if we are looking for a winger, and Burnley Tom says, have any of us seen anything of Tete at Leicester last season? I'll be honest, I haven't. A mate of mine said he was pretty crap, though. Well,
that decides it then. That's it.
Useless, right? And he's got, I think it's 1 goal and 1 assist in 17 games at Galatasaray on loan this season. But I do just wonder whether, is he any better than Benson and Zaroury? Because he played not that many times for Leicester. So experience-wise, he's not that many games in front of a Benson and Zaroury. We do seem to be being linked with players who aren't getting much of a look in. Is it Papagaye down at Marseille? I think he's played twice for Marseille this year. Yet all of a sudden we've deemed him as being possibly good enough to add something to a squad in the Premier League. So I do just wonder whether or not there is something. We have had a question about from Danny Ward, who says, is there any murmur of dressing room unrest? A few unhappy players in there, Muritz, Zaroury, Benson. Simon Ed says, what's Simon Ed say? Benson's a game changer, must be a fallout. You've got to start to draw some of these conclusions, haven't you? that if we are looking at wingers, when we have got plentiful wingers that aren't injured, two of which were game changers and game winners in the championship, if they're now deemed, having been given new extensions to contracts, deemed no longer required, why are we then thinking about going out and buying wingers or bringing other wingers in on loan when we've not really given a fair crack of the whip to the two, fan favourites that we've got there, if you will,
who both signed new contracts in the summer?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the perplexity. Like I've said before, as a caveat, I mean, if it was triggered by performance, by whatever it was, appearances, goals, promotion, whatever it was, a pair of them have signed, extensive new deals, only for us to then barely see a sniff of them in pre-season, and then for nowhere near from then onwards. It is absolutely baffling, is it? So we'll go back to what Vincent was saying a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about was it saying the Benson's situation is slightly different the other way around. I can't remember quite to 100%, but it's not been explained, has it? It's not come out via the various press briefings, etc. And everyone's in the dark, and it's just a real crying shame. He's a folk hero. The Benson's a folk hero at the end of the day. He will go down in Burnley legend, for that magic night at down the road. But I'd be absolutely gutted if he left.
Yeah. Quick one here on a night shift, guys. Any chance you can upload this as a podcast when it's finished? Yes, we will be doing that. It'll be available as usual, as the usual podcast. That's kind of the idea. Just give you a live version of it as well. But yeah, this will be available as a normal podcast, and it'll be really interesting for people to hear me say that tomorrow during the podcast, that it's available to them.
Imagine doing that, Simon. Imagine more editing work to do.
So we've got tons of questions. I think we should dive right in. I think Greaves is in the command seat there. We've got so many questions. We don't want to leave them hanging out there, having solicited them. So why don't you pile in, Greavesy, with some of these? There's a lot of good ones there to talk about.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, there's no game this weekend, so we've got plenty of, we might as well turn to some questions. So Joe Patterson's asked a few questions, but I think this is a question from Joe that I think is really interesting. So Joe says, do you think the club should take the transfers away from Company and appoint a Mike Rigg? Now, there is the letter A before the words Mike and Rigg, so we're not suggesting
we're not getting
Mike
back.
Rigg comes back, but I'm interested to know what you guys think. We've discussed on the podcast a couple of times about whether Company needs an experienced head as some kind of coach. But this is kind of perhaps a little bit different in terms of appointing a Mike Rigg. Now, as we understand, the transfers are all kind of set by Vincent and this company that he part owns. This appears to be, outsourcing the recruitment side of things. But Justin, recruitment last summer, so summer 2022, massive thumbs up. Recruitment this last summer, 2023, get my dates right, not so much. Do we bring somebody in just because we've had one potentially bad window in three? Maybe 1 in 4 at the end of this current transfer window?
It's a really difficult question to answer this because we don't really know how it works now, do we? I'm sure it's not Vincent Company saying, I want this guy, let's get him, and that's it. I'm sure a lot of people have input into how that situation develops, and given that it's all run by this sort of separate company it's all stats based, isn't it? They look for the profile of the player and all that sort of thing. It's hard to imagine that somebody else is going to have a massive impact on that. Are we saying we want somebody to come in and completely take over, have the final say on transfers? I don't think so. I think the manager's always got to have the final say on who he wants in his squad, because only he knows how he wants the squad to develop and who he wants in it. Could he use Could he use a little bit of experienced know-how on who knows? I mean, the kind of players that we are in for and that we are signing are the kind of players that an old head probably wouldn't know anything about anyway. So I don't know. I mean, we need to wait and see how this season plays out, how these players that we've brought in continue to develop, how, our opinion on the transfer window of last summer may have changed by the time we get to the end of this season, because we just, it's a work in progress, isn't it? So I think it's a little bit too early to judge yet.
Yeah. Woody, I mean, are we judging this current crop of players too harshly and too quickly because they've been thrown into the fight, perhaps without that experience? We know they've not got the experience, and does that then fall on the manager in terms of he's hanging a lot of these players out to dry by saying sink or swim, and we were sinking, but now we're swimming to a degree. So as Justin says, do we give it till the end of the season? Look at where we're at. We may move a couple on for biggish transfer fees after having had a good second half of the season. It may be that we sneak survival, and that actually having these players in for next year, everything becomes a lot easier because you've had that. Where do you sit on the whole kind of transfer? Does he need a guru to come in? Does bringing a guru in just add, another layer that we don't need? We've tried it before and it's never really come off, has it?
It's one of those, isn't it? It's you see fans, they'll throw things out there, and we might say he needs an old head, he needs something to help him. It'd be useful if there was somebody there to be able to look after transfers, etc., etc. But to your original point, he has his own little side hustle. Now, you're not suddenly going to tell Vincent Kompany, right, you can no longer get your own players, etc., etc. I've got a strange feeling that he's very much hands-on. That's his baby, etc. And that there's going to be quite a bit of upset if that goes through. But saying that, it's not his bloody club, is it? And saying that on top of that, who is there in the club who has a clue as to how they would or who they should employ in that role? So it's a little bit of one or the other. You're stuck with Vinny to a greater or lesser degree because he understands it all. He's been given the keys. And then what actually happens once you take those keys away, etc., and who then makes that decision. So it's a little bit the better devil and be careful what you wish for, I think. But I think there's a case to say something needs shaking up somewhere. But if it suddenly starts to turn around, we'll have a different conversation about it again, won't we?
I mean, the logic of having a director of football type person in there who's responsible for transfers is that you get the continuity in place that you're building it for the club's benefit, not just that particular first team coach, as they often get called when they have a director of football. And I can totally see how that works. And it is starting to work at some clubs now, that I think, isn't it? It was when it first came into English football, people were like, who's in charge? Fergie'd never have a director of football above him and all that kind of stuff. But we are starting to see certain clubs, whether it be, I don't know who's a good example of it, really, Arsenal perhaps, who are bringing in players and building their squad depth in conjunction with that manager, but with the view that they're doing it for the benefit of the club, not just targets that manager's identified. If that was the case, we'd be looking at a major appointment for Pace and ALK Capital to go out and find somebody who would be building the football side of the club over the next 10 years, which would immediately come up against the fact that we have this arrangement with company who are doing this. So how would it work in practice if you bring somebody in and Alan Pace says, I want you to think of the big picture. Where are we going to be in 6 years' time? If you're signing a 17-year-old, is he going to be ready in 5 years' time to come into the first team? All this kind of stuff. But at the same time, you've got a company run by Vincent Kompany doing what presumably Kompany wants them to do. I could see that being a recipe for disaster, to be honest.
But we have to look. I mean, you look at the initial batch of transfers under ALK, and we were sort of banding them like a Moneyball approach. They brought in Nathan Collins. And they made a profit on Collins. Thought they could have made a bit more, but they made a profit. Cornet made a slight profit on Cornet, and Connor Roberts, who obviously we don't yet know what the end result will be with him. But it's the same. I mean, these guys, I mean, it's like Jamie Hoyland was saying on a previous podcast, and all these clubs have the data now. They all have the programs. You put it in. What assets do we want? Positional sense, pace, age, experience, how many games, whatever you're going to punch into your computer, and you're all going to come up with similar names on a sheet. I did an exercise while I was still at the Burnley Express where I got an analyst just to sort of, we didn't know exactly what Sean wanted, but we had a good idea. So we sort of ran the numbers and came up with players that you suspect. I mean, there was one that I think it was Kevin Campbell's lad at Stoke that was linked with Burnley around that time. So it was fairly accurate, you'd think. So Vincent's come up with these players, but you do need, like Jamie was saying, someone to actually physically go and get eyes on them.
Yeah,
and give you a proper scouting report. And again, what's he like off the field? What's his character like? Has he got a good family, etc.? Like Jamie was saying with Branthwaite, he stood up physically, to a journeyman League Two centre forward at Carlisle, and that sort of thing. You've got to. How many pairs of eyeballs have Burnley had on these players in the first place? You've got to get that balance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Vincent was spotted quite a bit out in Belgium, wasn't he? Certainly, in the transfer windows last season. I'm not quite sure how much he's done again. I mean, we had a comment there from Kyle Matthew Hilton, who said companies referred to the chairman and recruitment team in presses before. Seems unlikely. To me personally, AOK would relinquish all recruitment control to any manager. And I think that probably plays into what you were saying, Chris, about the signings we made under AOK. I mean, they weren't very typical Dyche signings, really. I mean, Collins possibly, but Cornet certainly not. And there was all talk of, Dyche not really making much effort to kind of convince Cornet to come to Burnley. I think the first time he met him was when he arrived at the training ground, despite rumours have it, Alan Pace asking him to go out to France to speak to him to try and get that deal over the line. But I just wondered...
Didn't get the omelette treatment.
Didn't get the omelette treatment. No, not like... we won't mention him anyway, will we? Let's be honest. Interesting from Dan Heat. Dan... rather cheekily asking, saying he was disappointed that the rumours debunked that we were going to have Barry Kilby on the show. Not sure where that came from. Don't believe everything you read in the press. We are hoping to get Barry on at some point to chat about his time here. But Dan also makes a point that the club seems to have moved to automatically triggering long contracts, 4 and 5 years. The upside of that is clear, and I think it's really clear. We let players go for a song because they're in the last years of their contracts or their contracts had come up. But that's a change of approach to the club. Should we be worried about it? And I think that is worth discussing because we are essentially tying the club to wages over a much longer period. We're not sure about the finances, and we'll repeat the open invitation for Mr. Pace or his sideman Bobby Ball to come on the show at any point that they want and do a review show with us. But should we be worried, Justin, that we are tying up, wages which won't be inconsiderate, insignificant wages? We're probably talking about the £30,000 a year mark and upwards if we're in the Premiership, probably the 20, 25 and upwards.
£30,000 a year? Who's getting that?
A week, sorry. I'm thinking about newspaper wages, but
that's more.
Joking, that's astronomical, mate.
Tying ourselves into 30 grand a week for players who, in Benson and Zarore's case, have not had much more than 90 minutes. Now, we need to get the timings right because we have had a bit of stick on up the Clarets because Chris said Koleosho had only played 6 games and he's played 15 games, apparently, but there we go.
What?
Yeah, apparently you said 6 games, mate. So you need to be checking your Clarets.
Koleosho when?
For us?
Before his injury. Yeah.
I didn't mention Koleosho.
Oh, well, there you go. Fact checkers, we need to get on that on up the Claret. Benson Zarori have got these massive contracts now for another 4 years, I think it is. should we be worried that we're, on the hook for 35 grand a week to both those, and we're not having a sniff of it?
Yeah, I think we should be worried about that. But I think it's you again. We're talking about aspects of players' contracts that we don't really know the details. When Dan says they automatically trigger these long contracts, I'm not sure what he means by automatically. Is it was it written into the original contract that when we get promoted, they automatically get an extension because we're in the Premier League? And you would hope that it's written into the contract that if we do get relegated this season, that will be sorted, won't it? That it could well be that those contract extensions are reliant on us staying in the Premier League. Certainly, you would hope the level of wages is reliant on us staying in the Premier League. But we've been burnt in the past, haven't we, by letting players' contracts run down and us not getting any sort of transfer fee. I think Tarkowski comes to mind, doesn't he? Last season, probably one of our best players over the last sort of 5 years, and he ended up leaving for nothing. So this guards against that, doesn't it? So there's an upside as well as a downside to it. And you would hope that the club's been savvy enough. I can't believe they haven't been savvy enough to build into these things protections that could save us from major sort of financial embarrassment. I've got my fingers crossed about that.
In January, yeah,
yeah. Well, yeah, but it protects the value, though, doesn't it? If Benson's contract runs out in the summer, we get nothing for him now, do we? So same with Zaroury. So I don't know.
Yeah. A couple of people, we flashed up a couple of comments there. Simon Eds, were the contract extensions not just to bump their wages up to align with Premier League football? I think they were, and I think that's what Dan was mentioning in terms of the kind of automatic. They felt kind of automatic rather than in talks. Kyle said, in my opinion, the recruitment failure hasn't been the quality of players, but the functions of the players we lost. And I think there's certainly something in that. He mentioned the runs behind, the Matson ball carrying. I think that's probably the reason why we've kind of suffered from that. But I just thought I'd open this up. Simon, I'll go to you because I know you're a massive Magic Mike fan. Who is worth any money in this squad? And Johnny Dugdale says Trezor definitely isn't worth what we supposedly pay or we're due to pay, because that is a loan with an obligation to buy. And our young keeper definitely isn't worth what we paid. Now, again, big discussions on at the Clarets around transfer fees and things like that. And we know that all the fees are, subject to add-ons and all of this carry on, and England appearances and getting into international squads and playing in World Cups and appearances and all this, bollocks we get now with transfer fees. But Simon, who is worth any money in this squad? Let's deal with this, and don't throw any transfer fees out, because we always get criticised. We got criticised because Odegaard is apparently 11 million euros, not 12. But what's €1 million between friends under ale? Oh, his microphone's gone. I think he might be on mute.
I'm just distracted by that avatar that Johnny Dugdale has. A benefit scrounge your mum's 10k Vegas trip. So
I didn't even see that when we put it up.
That's in Mike Trezor territory. Is that in terms of money squandering? Who's worth any money in this squad? Well, there's quite a lot of them are worth something, aren't they? But I mean, does Johnny mean really who we're going to make a profit on?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that might be. I think that might be what we're saying there in terms of, who are we going to turn a profit on quickly, if you will.
Well, you would think either of the two wingers who've shown up well, Odegaard and Koleosho, if presuming he gets back to fitness and so on, you'd think we would get more than what we paid for those two, both having shown that they can play and compete at Premier League level, albeit only really glimpses to Burnley fans so far. They haven't taken the Premier League by storm, so I don't think we'll be doubling our money on them or anything. But let's not forget, we watched Maxwell Cornet and weren't overly impressed totally, were we? He's exciting, he had his moments, but you could see his limitations. You could see that there was, we weren't quite sure what position he played and various other things. And someone still came in with a decent offer for him, West Ham, didn't they? And took him off ours. Nathan Collins looked good, but how many games did he play for us? I mean, I don't want to give the number out because somebody will correct me, but he wasn't a regular, was he? Because Tarkowski and me were the regulars, but he came in, did well, showed up, looked well. You thought, well, he might be a decent replacement for Tarkowski when he goes if we'd stayed in the Premier League. But we did get good money for him. So people will come in, and there is a big premium, and it's worth remembering this on all the transfer fee things. If you've played and shown you can do it at the Premier League, even if it's only for a limited period of time, that bumps your value up a really lot over somebody who, dare I say, has been, player of the year in a sort of middle tier European league or something. That doesn't necessarily translate into his value, but it does in the Premier League. It really does. So I think we've got a few. I think Sander Berg we get money for. Broader question, is it working as a strategy to buy these players cheap and sell them high? No, that doesn't seem to be working at the moment.
We've not borne that out, have we? Let's be honest. Let's be fair to the strategy. We've not yet, until we get a full season. I don't think we're
the jury's definitely out on that. There are a lot of players. There are a lot of, there's a number of players who have already shown significant improvement, and we're only halfway through the first Premier League season.
Yeah.
We've got to bear that in mind.
Amdouni, by the end of the season, Amdouni might be worth a lot more than we think he would be now. Yeah, so that's a fair point. Yeah.
Foster, definitely.
Foster, I think Foster's a really good example, as somebody who will get you goals in the Premier League. John Robertson, I presume, has been on alcohol. Because he says I can't
running as high from his mile for Lyle.
I think he must be. Got a lot to give John credit for. His mile for Lyle campaign has been absolutely superb, and a big shout out to David Clark as well, who he's really been miling for Lyle. I think he's probably done goodness knows how many miles for Lyle. But John says we could sell O'Shea for a bit of a profit, only a bit, at the end of the season. It's weird, isn't it, that we're saying this, having been very critical of the former West Brom man at the start of the season, but he is turning into one of those players who you can see that we brought in cheap. He's been developed under Vincent Kompany, and there may be one or two suitors for him. Should we go down and the opportunity arises to move him on for double the 3 million we paid for him or whatever we paid for him. Need a fact checker on that, but. Chris, this is part of the model, isn't it? For all the excitement of Odegaard and Koleosho and Amdouni, actually getting a £1 million player like Vitinho and selling him for 3 million because he's starting to prove himself, getting an O'Shea for 2.5, 3 million, whatever we paid for him, and selling him for 4.5. They're not huge profits. We're not suddenly going to be getting Neymar or Messi on contracts for that kind of profit, but it is turning profits, isn't it? It is bringing players in, improving and shipping them out.
Well, exactly. That's something you steadily keep doing that. If you improve every player you bring in and make a profit on every player, then the likelihood is that you go out and sign a better player and try and do the same again. You only have to look at the top clubs in terms of their academies. Just supplementing their spend by selling, the lads from the academy for whatever it is now. The fees are astronomical for the academy lads, but there's Chelsea, City, United have always had great success that way. But the best thing that Vincent in his recruitment, the age range of the lads he's signed. Even Delquois, 24, €3 million, €3 million according to Transfermarkt. There might be someone who looks at him if Burnley go down and think, you know what, he could play centre half, he could play left back. I'll give Burnley, whatever, double their money for him, sort of thing. It's you're not blowing the budget on players like him. Similar with O'Shea, 24-year-old lad. He's had a sniff of it before with West Brom. He's an international footballer. He's going to be playing for Ireland, you'd suspect, for best part of a decade to come. And as many people have said, he has improved vastly. You look at his. We've brought it up a couple of times. The aerial duels. I think he was third in the Premier League at the last count, behind Van Dijk and Kilman at Wolves. So there's areas of his game there that are absolutely tip top. Others that need improvement and are improving. But yeah, I just struggle to think. I mean, I'm doing it. If you're led to believe, 18 million euro, is someone going to pay that for him? In excess of that for him, and so on.
This is the weird thing. Like Simon says, we might, you might chance upon somebody in a European league who thinks he might be worth a punt. But I agree with you. I think it's a bit of a strange one. We should just point out we're doing live fact checking just to make sure we don't fall foul. But the O'Shea fee was close to £7 million, not the 2.5-3 million that I had him down as.
7.8 million euro, apparently. If we're going,
there we go. Transfer mark, £7 million for Dara O'Shea.
Don't forget how mad the Premier League can be with transfers.
It is.
Well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
If Zeki Amdouni ends the season scoring 3 in 3, that might, add 8-9 million to his value in terms of what somebody might pay for him.
I mean, we've seen Richarlison go several times for big fees, haven't we? And he's barely
exactly.
I know he's in a bit of a purple patch now at Spurs, but barely kind of pulls up trees. Let's have a look what else we've got. I think this is an interesting one from Simon Holding. Raise money through departures to fund quality central midfielders. Key area for the Premier League. I think it is the most important area in the Premier League. And we do lose that area, don't we, in most Premier League games? I mean, Woody, we've had this conversation about what we've needed, and we said in the summer we needed a big, rangy central midfielder who's tough in the tackle, can get from box to box. Simon's not wrong there, is he, in terms of that is the area where we're constantly pulling. I'm going to say pulling our hair out, but there's only really Chris that's not follicle challenged on this.
It's all gone.
It's all gone. Probably through watching Dara O'Shea at £7 million and watching us lose midfield battles, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, there's the argument, isn't there, that if we can reinvest this into some quality instead of the quantity, then we'll be seeing something. So it would be nice to see an improvement, a step up, etc., etc. Whether that happens though is another thing entirely. Whether he just keeps repeating the model and just hoping things come to, then we don't know.
How many of those rangy midfielders are there, though? I mean, it's sort
True.
of everyone used to talk about the Makelele role, but now everyone's talking about a role that basically Yaya Toure made his own. That you only you're looking at the Bellinghams of this world, and the other French lads at Real Madrid, and I think people, Lokonga was obviously linked in the summer and looked half a player for Luton the other night, but. It's would he have made a difference? I don't know on that showing. I'm not 100% sure.
It's interesting, isn't it, that people focus on that position as like needing somebody who's really strong physically, and it is that Yaya Toure, Patrick Vieira, Makelele sort of presence that people think of when they talk about a midfield destroyer or someone who. But Liverpool couldn't replace Fabinho, could he? Who played that kind of role? They couldn't find anyone. They've ended up with the Japanese
Endo playing there,
Endo, who's not a big physical specimen at all, but he does break it up and he does do that job. So maybe we need to think about that position a bit more.
He's like a Cullen, isn't he? He's like a Cullen, Endo. He's just a metronome. He doesn't give the ball away, and I say he's not physical, but he's usually in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I thought he was very impressive against us. I really
liked
him. He looked fantastic. And I mean, talking of that, a couple of people have mentioned Luton in terms of team spirit and giving it a go. Somebody's mentioned that they've just signed or about to sign Dan Burn from Newcastle. I mean, that's a bit of a signing. That is a real signing if that's true, and they pull that off. Let's move on to kind of some off the field matters, because I think it's it is worth tackling. We've got a few questions on the off the field. John, recovering from his O'Shea faux pas, says, Burnley supporters, why are they not valued at all now by those in charge? Removal of the player boards, stopping the food banks, freezing them out. There does feel, I mean, we took a bit of stick from people when, you said, Justin, I say you took a bit of stick, Justin, for saying it doesn't feel like Burnley anymore. And a few people went, did it feel like Burnley last season? We know what you mean from a playing point of view, but from an off the field point of view, Justin, that was part of your argument, wasn't it? That everything just feels a little bit corporate, metronomic almost, that it's just existing as a business?
It does feel a little. It's difficult to quantify, isn't it? Because it's like a feeling, isn't it? That everything just seems to be a little bit more detached in some way, and they seem to be going. They seem to be going sort of round. They seem to be really keen to sort of key in to the history of the club. The pre-match Jordan North poem and all that sort of stuff, and the videos that they play before the game. They seem very keen to play on the club's history in that way. But like John says, a lot of the stuff that connects the club directly to the community seems to be. They seem to have a bit of a less of a commitment to that. Almost like they don't quite understand how it works. Almost like harking back to the good old days is enough to keep that community connection rather than actually. I mean, I've said this many times on this podcast. Burnley Football Club is a community asset, isn't it? It does not belong to ALK. It belongs to the town of Burnley, and it ought to be used for the good of the town of Burnley. And if all these things are happening, if like all the ways in which the community, it actually physically in the town is being cut off from the club, then that can't be a good thing because a club like Burnley, survives and thrives on that connection with where it's from. And I think it would be a massive mistake to let those connections, disappear.
Yeah. Simon and Woody, I know you were desperately considering whether to buy international membership so you could get your treble table in the fan zone for the odd appearance. Your Zoom call with a fringe player at some point over the course of the season. I mean, you obviously both lived in America. I mean, unbroken service in America for you, Woody, and you've been back in America for a number of years now, Simon, having been back over here for a number of years. I'm really interested in your connection and what you feel from a connection to Burnley Football Club. And I wonder whether the kind of arrival of JJ Watt, who I think, my personal view on JJ Watt is I think he's doing a fantastic job in terms of pushing, and he clearly has a bit of a sense of history and things like that. I just wondered from your two's point of view, whether you felt a stronger connection previously to Burnley Football Club, whether the onus is on you to have the connection, not living in the town, so you have to work harder to keep that connection. But I'm just interested, as international fans and fans who don't live in East Lancashire, whether or not you feel that there's been a lessening of the kind of connection you feel.
Go on, Woody.
To go with that,
yeah.
Woody.
No, I mean it's a good question. It is, but I don't think there's much difference between being, say, an expat fan in the US and somebody living in Norwich, for example. There's literally no difference between that. Your history is your history. The culture of the club is how you grew up with the club, and your memories are still the same. It's the same no matter what. But I think harking back to this thing about the history and the food banks, etc., I think some of this is for American fans, because American folks trying to understand the sport, you can't quite dig into the community aspect, but you can buy into the history. They like that as a package. And so I think some of that might be for newer fans trying to sell the club to a broader, newer fan base within the US. And I think that's not a mistake, but it's a mistake, obviously, to do that at the expense of Burnley as a community club. Because even though, yes, all football clubs will say they're community clubs, but Burnley especially is the heartbeat of that town and the area. And if they're not going to fuck this up, because nobody's going to allow them to fuck it up. That's the point. This isn't their club, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think the thing about the supporters club is probably the worst example of what they've done. Really, just cutting off really clubs that have been well established and people who've been really committed to the club, who were there during the time when, a few of us will remember when there was fundraising efforts for the youth team done by some of those people on message boards and through supporters clubs and that kind of thing, and sponsoring young players and all that kind of stuff, because the club didn't have the resources to do those things. And to sort of freeze those people out and those organisations out, I think reflects, well, it's a bit of an arrogant thing to do. And it's also, I think, it doesn't exist in American sports here at all. Those kind of rooted supporters clubs that, here be Clarets and things like that. It doesn't exist. You have fan groups and booster groups, as they call them, for college sports and that kind of thing. But, no NFL club is going to sit down and talk to, the Pittsburgh Steelers supporters club about what they should be doing. It just doesn't exist. They'll consult with fans in a certain ways, in a sort of marketing sort of focus groupy type way, but not that sort of democratic participation piece that is part of that. So I think they just don't, the fact that they, selected a board of people to be an advisory board is much more of an American thing to do than saying, who do we meet these people? And I think there were some comments came out of Bobby Bull's interview where he was saying, like, we just felt that they were a bit negative, and these people were just whinging, and we wanted people who were going to be positive. Well, yeah, you would, but you do have to listen to people who whinge as well if you really really want to be part of it all. That's part of the process. And I don't think supporters clubs should dictate what's happening either, but it seems unnecessarily antagonistic what they've done with the players' boards that were around the ground, for example, that were all voluntarily put together and fundraised and organized by fan groups and everything, and then suddenly they're sat out of sight for since then, and nobody really knowing what's happening with it. So I think they could improve a lot of things on that, but I wouldn't hold my breath on it, to be honest, because I don't think it's part of their business culture.
Yeah,
there's enough of an area where they can put those boards back. The turf to town walkway now. There must be enough sort of. I mean, if it's not directly on the turf, in and around that, the walk down Yorkshire Street. But I miss the old cutout ones as well. You remember the old cutout ones on the Bob Lord stand wall there at the one of Glenn Little and Ian Wright and I think Pates again and players like that. Obviously the legends from the 60s, etc. But it's criminal, really, that not only have they they've been long gone, but give them an explanation. What are they doing with them? Have they done away with them? Are they keeping them for posterity? What are they doing with them? It's just bizarre.
I believe something is happening. I think Tony Scholes said on Up the Clouds that there has been some communication about what's happened. I'm not going to labour too much on this because I'm still distraught about it. But Simon Ed says, think ALK should chuck somebody into the KSC 110 club and keep it alive. It's such a shame. I think most of us have had pre-match pints in there. Just wanted to move on to something Thomas Pickles mentioned, away from incomings and outgoings, with a few people picking up on pace and other ALK members wearing the hats with the B logo. Do the panel envisage any sort of official rebrand upon their rising? Now, we kicked off a little bit because of the new kind of single colour badge that appears to be on all the kind of Premier League stuff in the summer. This B that Alan appears to be wearing on his cap, I don't mind it, I have to say. I think if you want something a bit more subtle than a Burnley badge on a piece of merch, do we perhaps see, like United have done with their third kit, I think it is this season, they've just got the devil on.
So all the Adidas clubs on the third strips have got Roma and Juventus and sides like that.
Yeah. Do we see an official rebrand, or do we think it's just, again, maybe for that American market where we're used to seeing, I think we've said on the podcast, it feels very American kind of college sports, collegiate wear that you can stick on a baseball jacket, a cap, a T-shirt. What do we think? Justin, you're our kind of fashion expert with your cap on there. What do we think about the B? Is it something we should be worried about, a rebrand?
No, I mean, I have seen that B. I didn't. Does the B stand for Burnley on that cap? Is it? I don't know. I've never seen it anywhere else.
It's the same font, the Oktoberfest font, as we christened it in the WhatsApp group. The kind of October
right, the new
font that we used.
the new cup.
That was the polite version of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've said before, haven't we? If we're going to change the badge, it's got to be to this one, hasn't it? It's got to be.
You think
this
so?
is the coolest badge we've ever had. That's the coolest shirt we've ever had. If there's going to be any kind of single mono color rebrand, it's got to be to this. I'm not buying the B that he's got on his cap. No, I'm not having that.
I think if you had a vote, among the fans, I don't know if they'll bear me out on this, but I think most would go for the crest that was through the 80s and 90s. You see so many guys.
The one with the hand.
Yep. Yeah, so many people with tattoos of that on their various parts of their anatomy. So it's obviously everyone wants wants things clean and tidy in this day and age, don't they? The badges, and it's a bit complicated, that one. But I think
do it. Let's have a poll. Let's have an online poll about it.
Yeah, I think
let's do it. What do we think?
Yeah, SNFC BMF 12799 says, which bits of the badge would you keep? And I think, I like the hand. I think the hand is quite
Andy
nice.
Andy Farrell's hand. Yeah,
Andy Farrell. There we go. It's a bit David
claiming
Blaine,
offside. Yeah,
but there is certain. I don't mind certain things from a kind of, being a bit creative with the merchandise. I'm not necessarily somebody who wants to be, on a city break somewhere walking around head to toe in Burnley crest, but I might, something a bit more subtle from a t-shirt point of view. And we might have just the answer, big wink, coming up for you guys. In the next week or so, once we've sorted out the British Cayman Isles bank account and things like that to charge for.
You thought this was just an innocent chat about merchandise.
I know.
Really held beliefs, and then
subliminal messaging. But yeah, I think the crest and the rebrand. I wouldn't want to see the crest completely go. I wouldn't want to see, us suddenly turning out as the Burnley Bees or whatever madcap idea.
Jesus Christ.
Bobby Ball comes
like that. You give them
Bobby Ball comes up.
Bobby Ball's Burnley Bees.
I'm sure he's
never
coming
even
up with
thought of that.
Bobby Balls. Yeah.
The Bobby Balls. We should stop calling that. It's very rude, isn't it? Come on. It's very, very rude. But yeah, I think that,
and then of course you're welcome to come on the show anytime you want, Bobby.
Of course he is. Of course he is. We can discuss pies and things like that. Let's have a look what else we've got. Yeah, I mean, John Robertson mentioned the lock screen promotion yesterday, which was a very, basically you could type your name and number into Twitter and they'd send you back a picture of the back of the shirt with the new Oktoberfest writing. I don't think that rebrand of the players' name and numbers has gone down that well, given the fact both the men's and the women's team went out of the FA Cup in the very next round, and they were giving away free printing.
It's crazy. It's a crazy thing not to do it at the end of the season for the next season, isn't it? To just sort of drop it in halfway through a season on a shirt that's specific to a particular competition that you might we're not in it anymore, are we? So it's just weird, isn't it? It's like
it is odd. I mean,
it's like the safe standing thing that they said they're going to put in before the end of this season. Why? What's the rush? Why? That's going to upset a lot of people because some people are going to have to move out of their seats, aren't they, or whatever. It's just this like sort of constant sort of churn of new stuff. Without
how many logos and crests do we have? How many do we have? We have monochromes. We have the original. We have, the ones that are being sold on your hat now. I mean, we've got 4 or 5 at least floating around. I mean, it's not exactly brand consistency, is it?
Yeah. Jane Davison says Alan Pace can shove his B. We have 3 official crests that serve as well. Use those or parts of them. Yeah. Down to
we need more comments like that.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Jane. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to just stir the pot, but
you are.
Let's be honest. I am. I've got a microphone. I'm on YouTube, and I'm going to bloody use it. Have we seen any flags? Has anyone spotted any flags? I've not seen any flags yet. I think the 200 flags that we're giving out for free are probably now all on eBay. The guy in front of me, actually, him and his young lads, both had them and folded them very neatly in the cellophane and put them in their bags. So they were not getting used for what they were meant to be used for, which I can see. But let's talk about this wider kind of, I don't know if it's an Americanization. That might be really rude to some of our American listeners and viewers, but it does feel like, we don't need his own font, do we? That font's appeared around the ground on the screens and on the front of the program since the start of the season. It does, to me, remind me of Oktoberfest. It's very kind of 18th, 19th century Germanic.
What happened to the official fonts of the Premier League, etc.? Used to all have the same.
Yeah, that's it.
Uniform numbers and letters. It was. Don't bring it out for a cup tie when you've already been knocked out.
It's all very much part and parcel of the modern game, isn't it? Where it's the unveiling of the third shirt, and you either love it, loathe it, or it's a bag of shit. And we see it with every single club, and they just throw anything out there, left, right, and centre, and it's just an eternal money grab. And so I don't think it's going to stop. Some of the things you're going to like, some of the things are going to evolve, some of the things are going to make sense. They're going to have little focus groups, etc., etc. And so I don't have that much of a problem with it. We all have our preferences, and we can all get whatever the damn well we please.
I tell you what, if they did go all in next year and we had the V with that crest on it, right? We had Justin's hat on it.
Yeah.
Our away kit was yellow with the blue and claret trim down the sleeves, perhaps, or the one that Billy Hamilton wore at Spurs with the claret and blue across the front, or one of those really boring early 70s white ones with a round collar and just BFC down the side. That'd also be
that was nice.
But go for a complete retro repackage. And bring out loads of training gear and everything in that one thing, but consistently do it for like a year or two, and then do something else afterwards because you've got to make money. We all get that. We're not naive. But just do it instead of like, in November we'll have this font. In December we're going to maybe have a, just go for it properly, because the strips haven't been very interesting this year anyway, have they? Really?
Yeah. No, I would say the home kit is growing. I mean, I still don't like any of the sponsors, but the home kit I think is actually quite nice. I think what is interesting, like you say. I mean, we are changing kit supply next year. Castore are reportedly coming in, so Castore
they've had great success with Villa, haven't they? And,
Villa had the wet look kit that was universally hated. But apparently we're moving from Umbro to Castore next year. I think there is some local connection to Castore, but I'm not quite sure what the local connection is. But we were discussing the old TFG kits on the WhatsApp group earlier. As long as it's never TFG or what was the
Can I say what the players used to call it? If using those initials, it was total garbage.
What horrible. Like it looked like the stitching was too tight on like the logos. And things like that. Dreadful. I imagine they were made down Law House in that little church next to Law House Cricket Club, weren't they, that they used to use down there.
Cots brought the old Araya into town.
Araya,
it's a bit of Italian culture.
Yeah, I like the Mizuno kits. I think Lazio have got Mizuno kits this year. That's a bit of a throwback, I think. But we're about to hit the hour mark, so let's leave it there. Thank you very much for everyone who's joined us. I think we've tried to get through as many questions as we can.
How have we managed to talk for an hour without mentioning VAR?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Well, we kind of.
Wow.
I think
we'll do that next week.
Yeah, the blood has been boiling so much that we're kind of trying to keep blood pressure down. But I'm sure we'll make our thoughts known on Twitter and various.
Well done to JJ Watt for having a good old rant about it on American telly. Anyway, I thought he got his point over very forcefully there.
Yeah, he did. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at BO Podcast. Most of you probably already do anyway, but do tell your friends. Search for BO Podcast on Facebook. We will be back next week. There's going to be no debrief because there's nothing to debrief, and I'm pretty certain you don't want to hear about all our weekend plans. Maybe you do, but we'll be back next Friday probably, unless we decide to do another live. I think we'll see how successful this one's been. But thank you very much to all of the panel, Simon Evans, Justin Connolly, Paul Woodhouse, Chris Borden, myself, Andrew Greaves. See you next time, and up the Clarets.